Hi, I'm Fabrice Harari. Welcome to my OLE Automation course. This course was originally developed for WinDevCon 2009 and updated for WX DevCon 2013. In this course, we're going to talk about how to use OLE Automation and ActiveX inside WinDev or WebDev and see point by point, exactly step by step, how you can start using external tools in WinDev. We are going to rely on an example in using Excel for this course. Let's have a look at the basics first. And the first thing is, what is OLE automation? Well, it's a way to control external programs. And why would you want to control external programs? Well, because you want to add to your application a functionality that is not available in WinDev directly and we're going to see that there are many things that you can do outside of WinDev that you can want to control. So what external programs can you control with OLE automation? Well, you have to have a program that is an OLE server, which means that it is providing functionality to the outside world. Of course, not all programs are made that way. By example, Word, Excel, Adobe Reader, OpenOffice, Outlook, etc., etc., etc. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of programs that are working in ActiveX OLE automation mode. We're going to go in detail what is the difference between the two. So, how are you going to control those programs? Well, there are two different ways. The first is to embed the external application inside your own Windows using an ActiveX control. WinDev is coming with an ActiveX control in which basically you can drop an external application if that application is made for that. And then to control the application afterwards, when it's dropped in your Windows, you use OLE functions. Now, you also can control external application using automation syntax, and that's an object-oriented syntax. So if you're not familiar with objects at all, I refer you to my object-oriented programming course to give you all you need to understand that very well. So choosing one or the other depends on the functionality of the external application. You cannot drop all application inside an ActiveX control, even if they are providing OLE functionality. Not all of them accept to be inside an ActiveX. Some of them can be controlled only outside of your application. So it depends really of the external application. So the automation syntax will allow you to control an application that is displayed inside an ActiveX control or outside your application, as long as it's made for that. So what can you do with the external application? Well, clearly that is something that depends of the external application. So what they are offering as functionality, as external function, is the only thing that you will be able to do, and that depends of the external app. For Office application, Word, Excel, Outlook, and all that, it's all the things that you can do in VBA. Visual Basic for Application is basically all the things that you can do with Office, and that's a lot. Of course, in order to know what you can do, you need to ask the external application developers or publisher for their documentation. WinDev is not going to tell you what you can do in Word, Excel, Adobe Reader, or anything else. It's the provider of the application is going to tell you, okay, this is what is possible with our application. So it's not a WinDev problem. When you request information on an ActiveX, an OLE automation server, inside a WinDev forum, you are most of the time in the wrong place. It's possible that somebody already did the implementation and knows everything there is to know about it, but most of the time you're much better off doing a Google search and looking at the functionality that are available in the forum of the external application itself. If you look in the WinDev help, you will see that under the chapter of OLE you have different sets of information, and that can be a little confusing. So first you have to know that there are a few functions available to manage OLE, and these functions are these: OLE activate, OLE copy, OLE create empty, load, paste, play, save, server. And most of the time you will never ever use them. Why? Because these functions are extremely old, support only OLE 1, which is basically from the time when I was a little kid, and are totally supplanted by the automation syntax, and the automation syntax is not using these functions at all. So these are only basic functions that most of the time you don't need and that you should basically forget, and just know that they are here to confuse you. So don't pay any attention to this function. You most probably will never use them. Now the new syntax, the automation syntax, is all about objects. It's if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming, don't worry, because there's not a lot of things that you will have to do that is really object. It's just a different way of coding, and if you want to learn more about that, I refer you to my objects course. Now it is the logic of object, but it is a specific syntax. It's not the same syntax as with the regular W language object. So the syntax is this: greater than, greater than. That's what you need to know when you see that you're talking about something that is done with automation. And in fact, it is very simple. When you want to declare an automation object, because that's what the first thing that you have to do, you have to declare it. So to declare an automation object the same way that you would declare an integer or a string, you're doing this. You're typing the name of the object. Here you can see with the m_xxl that it is a member of a class. So this is some coding that has been done inside a class, a regular WinDev class, and you're saying that it is an object. And what type of object? OLE dynamic. That's what it is. That's the only syntax that is available for automation objects. Then that is just the declaration of the name. Then you're saying that the mxxl is going to be an object OLE dynamic. Then when you need it, you're going to allocate the object. And here, to do that, you're going to do equal, the name of the object, of course, equal new object OLE, and after that you're going to use the name of the OLE server. How do you find the name of the OLE server? Well, it is available in the registry, or you can find that very easily on the web. That's an information that is heavily published, of course. The publisher of the application is giving you that name. So here we have an example where we're using the Excel OLE server, and its name is excel.application. That's when you want to create a new Excel instance. Now, if you want to use an existing Excel instance, something outside your application has already created the Excel page, so you have Excel open and all that, and you want to get it, then instead you're going to do name of your Excel variable that you declare as object early dynamic, and you're saying to that object to get the active object of Excel application. And be careful, it's the active object. If you have several Excel pages, then you start to be in trouble to get the one you want. So always when you work with outside application, you will encounter some little problems like that. Now, once you have an Excel OLE object inside your application available, then you use it. And to do that, that's where the greater than syntax comes into play. So what are you doing? You're doing name of my variable, greater than, and after that it is something that is depending of the external application. There is no guidebook in WinDev of this on this workbooks open as worksheet. That is coming directly from the outside application. We're going to see how to find about it later. Now, once you are done with your OLE object inside your application, you have to delete it. You have to free the memory. Otherwise, this thing is going to linger in your program till the end of time. So to do that, again, it's an object syntax, and you're doing delete mxl. And that's all there is to know about the automation syntax. As you can see, there's nothing really frightening, as all that stands on one small page. That's all you need to know in order for you to be able to use any type of OLE server available on the market. Now, of course, there are some problems that you have to be aware of when you start using this kind of techniques. You are working with an external program, and that has a lot of consequences. You're not working with something that is included in WinDev. This means, by example, that you need to have the program installed everywhere your own program is going to try to use it. Clearly, if you want to work with Word as an OLE server, Word needs to be installed on your client on your customer computer when your program is trying to use it. Otherwise, it won't work. That's something. It's not like you could incorporate some function of the external program and have them ship with your program just like that. No, the external program needs to be there. Worst, it has to be installed correctly. Very often you encounter a problem just because, well, your external program is not properly installed. It's partially installed, it's an old install, it's something. So you're going to get in trouble just because of stupid things like that. You also need the proper version. When you start using an external tool, you have to be aware that this tool is going to evolve, that not all your customers will have the same version of Office, that it's possible that something that were working with one version are not going to work with the new one, or that something that you're taking as granted because you're starting to work with version 10 will not work at some customers because they are using version 8, and you have no control over that. So be extremely careful when you decide to use an external tool. It is a Pandora box. Also, you need a permission to use the external tool, and that is something that depends on the license of the external program. If Office is installed somewhere, you can use its function as OLE automation. But there are some tools that are sold only as OLE server. They are not independent tools. So if you want to use them, then you need to check what kind of license they have, and that you are correctly selling the proper license to your customer at the same time that you're selling your software. And of course, I would say the most important thing for you is that you need to learn a new tool language. WinDev is not going to give you any solution on how to use an external program. You can use an external program with WinDev, but you need to know the external program, and you need to look at its documentation and learn how it works, what is its syntax, in order to be able to use it. That's something there is absolutely no way around. We are now going to talk about the Excel case. We're going to use Excel as an example to give you a starting point in the world of OLE automation. Why Excel? Well, the first reason is that there is a very good example coming with WinDev already made that I didn't have to develop, and I'm a little lazy. So this example is going to serve as a basis for our study. Now, I'm not using the last version of the example. The last version of the example in WinDev 18 is called WD Controlling Excel, and I'm using an old version called WD Excel Control. The reason why I'm doing that is that they were doing something extra in the old version that I want to show you, that I think is extremely interesting, and that is something that is not done in the new version, and I explain why later. So because you maybe do not have all the old version installed with your program, you will get this version as part of the course. You will get a backup of the project. Also, this project has been corrected by me. The reason why it was written for visibly an older version of Office, and Microsoft changed the way they are registering things in the registry. Their settings are now organized differently, which means that one of the method of the class, it's a C Excel class, the method N version Office was returning 0 all the time because, well, the settings had changed. So I modified the code in order for it to work with Office 2010. And that's a perfectly good example of the kind of problem that you will get each time there's a new version of the tool going outside in the world, and you do not master the fact that your users are going to install the new version or not, which means that some things may or may not work anymore. And that's something you have to be aware of when you decide to use this kind of tool. Why Excel also? It's because many developers need to interact with Excel for application. It's really a classic, so we should as well work on something that you can reuse quick. Now, also this example contains way enough information to get you started on automation. In fact, it's quite complete, and it gives you a good start and good methodology to do that. So I decided to use that one. Now, in Excel, how are you going to find the available functions? And I was telling you earlier, it depends of the publisher of the product. So it's not a WinDev question at all, and you cannot rely on WinDev, PCSoft, or anybody else than Microsoft to find information. In this case, you're going to go on the web, on the Microsoft Office development page, and here is the address that I found for you. And how did I find it? A simple Google search. You're working with Office, you want to do some development with it. Logically, you do Office development, and you're going to find a number of pages talking about the subject. Now remember, all this information that you're going to find depends of the version of Office that you are using, and there are compatibility problems. You can see here it was just a simple registry setting change in Office 2010, but there are much bigger problems. By example, there were old version of Office where the Visual Basic for application, the internal language, was translated in the in the target language. If your office was in French, then the VBA was translated in French too. And because of that, your code needed to have the function called in French, because the English function would not work. In WinDev, we can use both the French version or the English version of a function, and it will work exactly the same. It doesn't matter which version of WinDev you're using, if it's the US or the French, both languages are recognized in the code. That was not the case with Office. So depending on the version that you were using, well, your code would have to be in French or in English, and so on and so forth. So be always aware that there will be problems. Now, in Excel, there is a trick. In fact, in all the Office tools, there is a trick to find the code to do something inside your program. And this trick is to create a macro inside the external tool. So in Excel, you're going to do tools, macro, new macro, and by example, you're going to open an XLS document and change the sheet you're working on. By doing that, of course, it is recorded inside the macro, and after that, once you have done what you want to know about, you stop the recording. At that point, you have a macro that you can restart, and is going to open an Excel document and change the sheet you're working on. Okay, but what's interesting is that you're going to be able to edit the macro by doing tools, macro, macro, and then look at the code, the original code in VBA. And then the only thing that remains for you is to translate that code in W language with the syntax that we talked about earlier. And here is exactly that macro and the corresponding translation. So the first thing that you get in the macro is something that say, well, I'm not a guru in VBA, but clearly it changed the directory to C temp. That is not necessary to translate because it's for the dialog box change. It's for to open in the dialog box in the thing, and you're not going to do that. Now the next line is workbooks.open file name equal ctemp test xls, and you translate that by OXL, name of your Excel object in your program. Then workbooks, greater workbooks, greater open, and then in parentheses the name of the file to open. Then you want to change the sheet that is visible. Okay, say okay, sheets2.select, and the corresponding translation is still your object OXL greater than sheets of sheets2 greater select. So what did we learn? Some lines do not need to be translated. You will get some things inside the VBA that dialog boxes, things like that, that you do not want to do on your side. So something you're just going to ignore. Then, very important, the dot in the macro is translated as greater than. That's the most important thing that you need to remember today. Then parentheses, open and closing, is translated as parentheses. No difference here. And functions need always the parentheses in W language. And here I'm talking about the last line. You see that the select on the W language side has the parentheses, and the select on the macro does not. So on the W language side, you need to have the opening and closing parentheses when you are talking about a function. As you can see, it is very difficult to translate. So before you faint when you see some long VBA code, You take your code and line by line you translate it and you test it line by line, and you see where you make an error in the syntax, and you're going to see that it doesn't take very long to take the right way to do it. It is now time to do a little demo of what the project itself is able to do. Let's have a look. Run the test, and here we are. We have a WinDev window opening, and in this window we have an Excel spreadsheet directly, and we can do things in it. As you can see, we can put value and do graphs and all that directly inside your application. So, what do we get here? Well, the first thing that you have to see is that the Excel document is embedded inside the application. And that means that we are using an ActiveX control to display that sheet inside the WinDev application. Now, the problem is that Excel by itself doesn't allow it. So there's a trick here, and that is exactly the part that does not exist anymore in the new example. The WinDev 18 version example this controls the Excel spreadsheet outside of your application. The reason for that is mostly because Microsoft by default want it to work that way. They want the Excel thing to be inside the Excel spreadsheet, visible and not part of another application. So by default they are setting things so that it doesn't work, and you will have to do some tweaking in the system if you want that to work. I'm going to show you how. It's in fact a double trick in order to do that. First, you have to use a relay. And for that, you're going to use another ActiveX called shell.explorer, which is in fact is the display of Internet Explorer. This thing is part of the system and is there even if you're in the case where you uninstall Internet Explorer for your system. The ActiveX is still there because the system relies on it for different things. So it's part of Internet Explorer, and basically what you do is you say that the ActiveX equals Shell Explorer, and that's it. Then you ask IE, the ActiveX of IE, to load an XLS document. To do that, this is the syntax, and that is one function of the IE ActiveX. So you have to find that out on the web. It's not in Excel, of course. So in fact you have two ActiveX for the price of one in this example. In order to display the XLS file, IE is going to start the Excel server to do that. And that's where the problem resides, because by default Excel is going to load your document inside an external sheet. So if you want to have it inside, there is a trick, and we'll reach that point very soon. Now, once you have your page open in Excel, it doesn't matter if IE was in the middle to open it. We are just asking the Excel application server to get us the handle of the active object, and then we're going to be working directly on the spreadsheet. This part is going to be the same. It doesn't matter if it's inside your application or outside. Then you're going to act on it with whatever you want, and you've seen the buttons in there doing lots of things inside your Excel. Basically everything that you can do in VBA can be done this way. Now, in some cases we don't want to have the spreadsheet embedded inside our application, if only to respect the wish of Microsoft to have that outside of the other applications. And in some cases we don't even want to have the spreadsheet visible. We want to load information in a spreadsheet, do some calculation, eventually get the result of the calculation, or prepare things, and we don't want anything to be visible because it's somebody else on another machine perhaps who's going to use the spreadsheet that we created this way. So how could we do that? Well, if we don't want to display the spreadsheet inside our application, clearly there's no need for any ActiveX control and no need for Internet Explorer in the middle, so all that part we can just forget. And we just create a CXL object, which is the class that is provided, and set Excel as invisible with CXL :visible function, which accepts a Boolean true or false. So by doing that, we are just basically making a spreadsheet in the background hidden that we can work with. So the trick, in order to have your Excel spreadsheet or Word document or anything like that visible inside your own application, then you need to modify settings inside the registry. And the settings for Excel in Office 2010, and be careful that these settings are going to be different for the different version of Excel and for different version of Word and so on and so forth. These are the settings. These are the two keys that you have to modify, and you have to change the browser flags value from 8, which open in Excel, to 800024 in hexadecimal, where it's going to open inside IE or inside your application, in fact inside the window where it's called. So that's the two tricks in order to achieve this kind of presentation. Now be very careful, because this may not work in the next version of Office. I haven't tested with all version, and the more you're going and the less it's going to work. But it's still a nice trick, and I wanted to give it to you as a bonus.